so many times we do not recognize our bad habits. And so I am all about, sometimes we just have to sit down with ourselves and think about, what are our habits? What do we do before we go to bed? What do we do when we get up in the morning? What do we do when we get angry? What do we do when we are feeling discouraged, or, whatever it is? We have to figure out, what are we doing? Is it toxic? Is it unhealthy? And then think, okay, what am I going to replace this with?
Without Fear of Her Future podcast is for women who are passionately pursuing financial freedom using multiple streams of income and real estate to accomplish their goals. We are here to empower you to be brave, dream big, and design a life that you love that inspires others to do the same. I'm your co-host, Andrea Engstrom, a real estate investor and business coach and co-founder of the Partnership for Realtors. And I'm here with my co-host, Tresa Todd, founder of the Women's Real Estate Investors Network and author of the book Without Fear of Her Future. Over the past 2 years, Tresa has had over 200,000 join her masterclass, where she teaches women how to become successful real estate investors. Hey, Tresa.
Hey, Andrea.
Hi.
Well, excited about today. Welcome to everyone to the Without Fear of Her Future podcast. This week's episode is all about how to stay motivated to achieve the goals that we have set for ourselves this year and not get overwhelmed when things are not working out how we hoped.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, let's chat about why setting and creating healthy habits are so important, Andrea.
Well, you and I are really passionate about this topic, Tresa. We talk about setting goals and creating good daily habits a lot, and we ask our guests about it because it's something that really, I think, defines who you are. It's I think your identity as a person is not who you used to be, it's who you have the potential to become. And so goals are all about our potential. Habits are about how we live out our values and what we say is important to us, and the active things that we do on a daily basis that move us towards our goals. And so if we are our potential, we are not who we used to be, we are our potential, then goals are all about who we are becoming, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I believe one thing that I have found is that whenever I am walking in my goals and I have good habits, I respect myself more, and I have more confidence versus when I just get up in the morning with no real goal for the day. I just find that I just dwindle the day away and
Yeah.
don't accomplish much. Well, then when you do that, you start stacking a day and a week and a month. Wow, you have lost so much time. You've lost money. You begin to lose your confidence. And I also believe that that's when anxiety and stress starts to creep up.
Absolutely. And we've talked a lot about goal setting on other episodes, but let's talk about setting goals or forming habits based on what others expect of you or based on the outside view of other people, because this is not a good idea, right? But I think that we compare ourselves to others, and so that's a lot of times how we set goals. And it's one thing to be inspired by someone that you admire and go, wow, if she can do it, I can do
Yes.
it. But it's totally different to compare yourselves to others. So let's talk about that. Why is that not a good idea? How does that hurt us?
Well, for one thing that you hear me saying all the time is that we are all in different seasons of life. And so if I start comparing myself to someone that is in a completely different season and they have that maybe, for me instance, I am in a really great season for entrepreneurism. I have an empty nest. I just have it's all about me and I can do anything I want versus somebody that has a husband and kids and taking care of sick parents, or they all of these other things. And so we just have to always be careful not to compare ourselves with someone that's in a different season of life or with someone that has a long history of experience and we're brand new, or there's
Yeah.
just a whole set of things. So we just always have to keep everything in line, or what are our true goals for ourself.
Yeah. I think that's really powerful because what you said about all of us have different backgrounds. We're in different seasons, but I think, sometimes I think people will tell me, because I did I got a really fast start as a real estate investor, but that wasn't the first thing that I did in business.
Yes.
And I think when you've had past successes, or you've accomplished other things that have led you to knowing what you're capable of, and being able to apply what you learned in a past career or a past
Yes.
accomplishment, and being able to apply it to what you're trying to do today, versus someone who has no experience, and they just been working a job or something, to be able to then transfer to being a successful entrepreneur over,
Mhm.
and having an expectation that it's going to happen overnight, because
Yes.
there's so many skills and things we need to learn and develop in ourselves in order to become the successful person that we want to be, so that we can do what it takes and have what we want to have. And when you have done things in the past that have helped you to become her, that when you enter a new arena, then you can show up as her, as
Yeah.
opposed to then saying, okay, I have this new goal and this new idea. And a lot of us will wheel spin for a period of time, or it'll feel like wheel spinning. But what we're actually doing is working on ourselves and who we
Mhm.
need to become in order to do what it takes. And so we can't compare ourselves like, oh, well, she was able to do it, and so I should be able to do the
Yes.
same exact thing, because you may not have done the work on yourself. And just like for me to go into like a completely different industry, or try something entirely new, I can set big goals in that arena. But if I haven't become who I need to be to do that particular thing,
Mhm.
then I have some growing and developing that has to happen in myself before I can expect to be an overnight success.
Yeah, I
Right.
agree. I mean, I came, 'cause that's where we're different, is I
Yeah.
came from, being in the medical field for 25 years, and I knew how to be a really good employee. A
Yeah.
really good employee, but my it compl everything changed for me, and you talk about having to make so many mindset shifts
Hmm.
from going from an employer to now being in charge and telling yourself what time you're gonna start on this, and what you expect for yourself, and it was a transition. Now I jumped in headstrong, and I was determined to make it, and I began to read the books, and I began to really, really work on it almost immediately, but I will never forget of just feeling, to be honest, disappointed in myself,
Yeah.
and seeing that like a day would or 2 would just go by and I had not accomplished anything. And so, but it did make me press in and go, okay, this isn't going to work. I got to do something different.
Hmm.
So, and then
Yeah.
talking about comparing ourselves, I attend a lot of masterminds, and a lot of the times I will be the oldest woman at a mastermind. So I will see these 30, 40-year-old women that have just had so much success, and I will have the tendency to compare myself to that. And I have to just check myself and say, "Okay, girl, you got a late start." And they have all of this technology experience in their life that I didn't have. And so we have to really balance not making an excuse for ourselves, but at the same time, not to compare ourselves to someone that has had a whole different life experience
Hmm.
and they've been at the game longer than us.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about those feelings of disappointment that you described, or like feeling disappointed in ourselves. I think a
Mhm.
lot of us, especially this time of year, because we've come through setting goals and we're all fired up at the beginning of the year, and then a couple weeks go by, and then we spend a day or two not getting anything done on our to-do list, and we start to throw up our hands and say, maybe I'm not her. Maybe I can't do this. Maybe this isn't for me. And I tried it, but it's not working out the way
Yeah.
I hoped. So let's just talk about that for a second. Like, where do those feelings of like feeling disappointed in ourselves, like, where does that come from?
Whew. Well, I think that we deal with it a lot more in society today because of social media than
Ah,
we did years ago. We didn't really know what everybody else was doing,
yeah.
20 years ago, but now we think we know because
Yeah.
it looks like they're doing all of these things on social media, and it can always feel like that we are not. keeping up with the Joneses and she's doing it better and faster and, all of those things. So I definitely think that there's more comparison now than there has ever been. But I mean, I think it's always been around, and the more confident that I think this is the real answer to the
Mhm.
question, the way I believe it. Um, the more confident that we are in ourselves, the less we will compare ourselves to somebody else. But if we are always feeling insecure with who we are, every time somebody's doing something faster or better, then it's going to make us disappointed. It's going to make us, bow down instead of just going, wait a minute, I know who I am. I know what I did this morning. I know what I'm capable of. Just keeping that in check.
Yeah. I think daily habits really play into that also, because for me, some of my daily habits that I think keep me on track or keep me feeling like, okay, girl, we got this, we can do this, is reminding myself who I am.
Yes.
And some people do that in reading scripture, and some people do that in meditation or a mantra that they say. I'm a big believer in affirmations and in visualizations and just reminding myself who I decided to be. Because I don't
Yes.
always wake up as her. Honestly, I write down things that I want to say out loud and remind myself that that's who I am in process of becoming. And I am so happy and grateful that I am in process of becoming her, but I don't always wake up as her. And so those daily
Yeah.
habits have to show up for us to remind ourselves who we are, to remind ourselves what we're focused on, what's important to us. And I think also why we're doing it. Because when things get really hard, we got to remind ourselves why we're working
Yes.
hard. Why is it worth it to go through this? To feel like we're failing some days, to feel disappointed in ourselves, and to kind of point back to like, why did we start in the first
That's
place?
right.
Mhm.
Yeah, the why is the most important thing. If we don't have a strong why, if we just did all this on a whim, we're never going to stick with it. It has to be, a word that is really I've just heard it a lot this year is desire. Our desire for something has to be strong enough, and if it's not, then we're just not going to do, and I'm talking it doesn't matter what it is. If we don't have a strong desire, we're not going to do it. When it gets
Yes.
tough, especially.
Yes. This is good
Well,
stuff.
let me ask you this. What about, being happy in the season that we're in? Because sometimes we're jealous of somebody else's season. So, do you have any tips for just being happy in the season that we're in while wanting to still grow and step outside our comfort zones?
Yeah. I mean, I think some of this points back to daily habits again. And we
Mhm.
talk about this so much, but part of my daily habits for me is about getting into that mindset of confidence and happiness. And some of those daily habits are really about, I call it getting my head on straight, and checking in on my spiritual fitness,
Yeah.
because I can become irritable, discontent, ungrateful if I'm not reminding myself what I have to be grateful for,
Mm,
and also, where I'm headed and why I'm doing it. I think that's a really important part of it.
yeah.
But talk to me about, what do you do? What do you do to, even when things are hard, like what do you do to get back to happy?
Well, one thing that I could look a little bit crazy, but I talk to myself. I mean, I talk out loud to myself all the time, and, about everything. So even like today, I have a really strong routine that I do every single morning. And so I remember I had followed my little routine today and I was coming down the stairs. I just finished my workout and I was coming down the stairs and turning the corner to, now it's time to take a shower and start getting ready and all of that. And literally coming down the stairs, I heard myself say, "Okay, girl, you're on track. Okay, girl." I'm looking at the time and I've done the things. And so, but at the same time, I hear myself so often saying, I will say to myself, I make my bed every day. And there are times when I don't want to make the bed. I want to walk past it. I just want to go, do in the living room and I will say it out loud. No, girl, make this bed. And something that I say to myself all the time, be who you say you are. If
Hmm.
I'm going to get on and have a podcast where we talk about healthy habits and I'm going to say all this, but then you show up at my house and the bed's not made and I haven't worked out in 3 days and I that's just not having integrity. So
Yeah.
sometimes just talking out loud to myself and reminding myself who I want to be and who I say I am is that really works for me.
Awesome. I was chatting with one of the gals in the partnership this week on our mindset mastermind call, and she was talking about how she will look at her vision board from last year and start to get discouraged because all those things didn't come true yet. And I was like, girl, me too. I'm not living in my dream house yet. I was supposed to be on a
Yeah.
fabulous trip with all my family right now, and I didn't book it. Like I didn't do all the things that I envisioned for myself. And she said, "You know what I did to pull myself out of that funk?" She said, I stopped and I made a list of everything I did accomplish.
Ooh, so good. So
Everything that
good.
I did actually get done, or obstacles that I overcame that
Mhm.
maybe they weren't even a goal, but it was a hard thing and I got through
Yeah.
it and I'm better for it, or I learned lessons from it. She said, I just made a list, like a written down list inventory of all of the good things that I did last year. And it helped me to see bigger picture. It is not just
Yes.
about a picture
Love
we
that.
paste on a vision board. And so I thought that was really brilliant. So
I love
shout out
that.
to Andrea Cash Dollar for that one.
Yes. And something else is I like to move those things over to the next year. If I
Yeah.
didn't accomplish it, let's move it over to the next year, but at the same time, analyze it.
Uh-huh.
Because one thing that I've learned is sometimes we have a goal and then maybe 3 months, 6 months, even a year into it, you're like, that goal's not even important to me anymore. So
Yeah.
instead of feeling bad that we didn't meet it, sometimes we have to just scratch through that goal and say, you know what? That's not even important to me. That is maybe a goal I never care about, or that's 2 years or 3 years from now.
Hmm.
So always and while we're talking about comparison, so many times we do put a goal down that wasn't even important to us, but it seemed like everybody else had that goal and we just needed to add it too. And
Yes.
so we just have to be so careful about that.
Yes. Yes. I think, especially as women, we will live in a space that is about other people's expectations for
Yes.
us. And some of us have a hard time even coming up with what do we want for ourselves, because
Oh, yeah.
nobody's asked us that question in our entire adult lives. We've
Oh,
just been focused on what everybody else wants and what's going to make everybody else happy, and trying to, you know, manage the emotions of people around us or be in control in some way. But we are so focused on what do other people expect of us and what do other
yes.
people want, and that ends up on our goal list. And so when we don't make traction on that goal, we're like, oh, I'm failing at my goals. But I think you're right. We have to critically examine, why did we write it down in the first place? Is
That's
it what we
right.
really want? And I actually want to share a couple things that I learned recently. And it was from a podcast from Mel Robbins,
Okay.
who we love. But
Yes.
she has this episode where she talks about how to manifest anything that you want. And I was like, okay, I've been doing this wrong. I've been thinking about it wrong, because I haven't really dug deep into this idea of manifesting. But she did it from a brain science perspective, which is what I love so much, is when she talks about the brain science behind some of this stuff that can feel really woo woo. And but the first step, because there's 4 steps to manifesting, that are backed by brain science, and it's based on like what Olympic team athletes are doing and how they will visualize themselves accomplishing a goal or achieving a level of success or hitting a better time or whatever it is. But the first step is to be honest about what you really want, because so many of us will write down goals for ourselves that are not what we really want. It's what we think
Mhm,
people expect of us,
mhm,
or it's something that is about someone else and it's not
mhm,
really what's the desire of our own heart.
mhm,
And so, when we write things down, we know that we're engaging that reticular activating system in our brain, and our brain starts paying attention to things that to go to work to help us make that become reality. But it also, when we write something down and we say a goal out loud, and then our immediate next thought is but that's not for me because, or I have so much fear around that. Or I don't really actually want that. And I hope it doesn't actually come true, but I feel like I should want that because somebody else wants it for
Yes.
me. And so
Yes.
we're doing ourselves a disservice by writing down a goal and then that is not something that is an honest thing that we want.
Mhm. Yeah.
And yeah, yeah.
I
But the
have a
next,
friend.
go
No,
ahead.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay,
Finish it up.
I was just gonna say that the next three things were the ones that actually kind of shocked me because it's like number one, be honest about what you really want and write it down. And then the next ones I thought were going to be something along the lines of like, say it out loud and visualize yourself accomplishing that thing because that's what I've always heard. But
Uh-huh.
she's like, number two, write down the work that it will take to get
Ooh.
there. Write down
Yeah.
the steps, the actual work that you're going to have to do in order to make that thing happen. And then step three is visualize yourself
Woo!
doing the work, not just
Not
living
the
in that.
thing.
Yeah, not just
Yeah.
living in your dream house or like, but it's like if I want to accomplish some kind of level of success in sales or in, doing a certain amount of real estate investing or something like that, I've always thought that I had to visualize myself after it had already happened. And
Mhm.
she's saying, no, the brain science tells us that we have to visualize ourselves doing the hard stuff and
Yes, I
to
love
like
that.
get into that flow. And then step number four is do the work. And I'm like, oh, right. This is how we manifest. Because
It's
what
not just by saying it and writing
oh,
it down. We gotta
yeah.
actually do the thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, it makes so much sense when we say it out loud like
Yeah.
that, but it's not what people are talking about most often because most
Yeah.
people want to say, write it down, put it out in the universe, make a vision board. And all of those are good things. But unless you follow it with a clear action plan and visualize yourself doing the hard work and then
Mhm.
actually do the work, then you're not actually going to get what you want. And
Yeah.
my friend Patrice from our network, she showed me her vision board and I was like, girl, that is the most brilliant thing because on her vision board, she wants to focus on health this coming year. And instead of putting some kind of bikini model that looks like she's got a fabulous physique, she put a picture of a girl who was sweating it out, lifting weights, doing the hard thing,
Woo!
almost that ugly face you get when you're lifting something really heavy. That was the picture on her vision board. And I was like, she gets it because you've got to
Yes.
visualize yourself doing the hard stuff.
Yes. Oh, that's so good. So good. I have to tell you the very first time that I ever used visualization that I remember, and I've never ever forgotten it. And this was probably 8 years ago. I was running in my very first mud run, and I wanted to know what all of the, things that we were gonna have to do. I can't
Yes.
even remember what they call them, but I had, like,
Obstacles.
studied it. Obstacles, yes, and I had studied those obstacles and I was going out and doing it. Well, there was one thing that I literally could not do, and it was the just bars where you have to let go of one bar and grab the next.
Yeah.
And Andrea, for whatever reason, I was so afraid to let go of the one to grab the other. And I was practicing at an elementary school, behind my house, and so if I fail, I was gonna fall 3 feet, so it wasn't
Right.
gonna hurt me, but I still could not do it, and, and I was so frustrated with myself, and so, one day, I woke up really early in the morning, and I just began to visualize myself letting go and grabbing the next bar and letting go and grabbing the
Yes.
next bar, and I just started seeing myself do that, and I got out of that bed, I threw on my clothes, and I ran straight over to that school, and I did it, and
Yes.
from that day forward, I could do it, and
Yeah.
so I do love the idea of visualization, but then you do have to follow through, go do the thing after you visualize it, but yeah,
Yeah.
I'll
Well,
never forget that.
I think it's brilliant. So let's talk for a little bit now about bad habits because
Ooh.
there's one thing to put good habits into your life, and it's another to let go of bad habits. And sometimes we start to develop bad habits actually as a result of setting unrealistic goals or
Mhm.
setting ourselves up to do something that is so scary and so intimidating. And so we start doing things like procrastinating, or we start doing things like coping mechanisms to like, oh boy, I'm so scared about this. I'm going to eat a cookie,
Yeah.
or just to treat ourselves because it was like, oh, that was so hard, and now I'm just going to like, drink 5 glasses of wine to reward myself for the
Yes.
hard thing. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs get into those cycles where we just put ourselves in hard, challenging
Yep.
situations so continually. And so we develop coping mechanisms to go along with those hard things. And
Yeah.
so, talk to me about some strategies that you've heard of or that you found for actually breaking bad habits like procrastination or overindulgence of some kind.
Well, first of all, you have to recognize it because I think so many times we do not recognize our bad habits. And so I am all about sometimes we just have to sit down with ourselves and think about what are our habits? What do we do before we go to bed? What do we do when we get up in the morning? What do we do when we get angry? What do we do when we are feeling discouraged or whatever it is? We have to figure out what are we doing? Is it toxic? Is it unhealthy? And then think, okay, what am I going to replace this with? And how am I going to recognize it? So then to just be, okay, I'm going to begin to recognize whenever I do this. I'm going to
Hmm.
recognize whenever I am going for the second or the third drink,
Hmm.
or whenever I am, whatever it is. Sometimes um, you know, we get negative. That'll,
Yeah.
you'll notice that you just have this negative attitude about things. And then we have to say, okay, why am I feeling this way? So
Hmm.
I think recognizing it and then being so determined that that's not who we want to be,
Mm.
that could be so helpful. And then another thing, what are we going to do in its place? So whenever I want that drink, what am I going to replace that with? Something that would give me that would also satisfy me,
Yes.
whatever that is, because, there's nothing wrong with satisfying yourself, but we need to find healthy things. So what would I enjoy right this minute? Sitting,
Hmm.
is it a 30-minute TV show? Is it reading a book, maybe that's fiction book, or is it getting on the phone with a friend? Just something that we enjoy to replace that negative thing.
Hmm.
And then I know you've probably heard this, but they say if you do something for 21 days in a row, you can either break a habit or create a habit. So I
Hmm.
have even had habits where I literally on a calendar and you hold yourself accountable. Like, I'm not going to do this today. And then you check it off. And then I'm like, because in my mind, if I can do it 21 days, it's not going to be an issue anymore. And
Absolutely.
so, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. One of the things that I've done in the past, because I know that when I travel, all of the habits are out the window. All of
Yes.
the, we're tempted in different ways. And so one of the things that I do when I travel is like as soon as I get to where I'm going in the hotel or the Airbnb or whatever, I will go to a store and buy a case of sparkling water because that's what I drink at home is sparkling water and it's a treat, but it keeps me from wanting to drink alcohol or, wanting to snack all the time
Yes.
or to reach for something that's just like a soothing thing. And so just to make sure that I've set myself up for success, even in moments when I'm out of routine, I think is really, really helpful. The other thing that I love that you said, Teresa, is that you like have to remind yourself who you are and like I'm going to be her. I'm going to be her. And there's something really powerful about that. And I know that I think he talks about it in the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. He talks about the idea of that you have to adopt an identity
Mhm.
that is related to the habits that you want to form. And so there's some people don't want to have to say I'm a smoker, but to develop a habit of running, you might say, I am a runner. And saying I am a runner is very different than saying, I'm going to get up tomorrow and I'm going to put on my tennis shoes and I'm going to go for a couple of miles. Is very different than saying, I am a runner. Okay, so
Absolutely.
as a runner, I put on my shoes in the morning and then I run 2 miles. So developing some kind of an identity around what it is you want to create as a positive habit, as well as being real.
Yeah.
about what your actual habits are and saying, okay, if that's who I am in reality, that's not who I want to be. Who do I want to be instead? And replacing
Yes.
it. That's good
Love
stuff.
this. Love this. Okay. What do you think is the difference between holding yourself responsible and setting unrealistic rules or standards that really ultimately hold you back?
Mm, that's hard, because I will often have big ideas for all the things I'm going to do and I'm going to do it all perfect. And I think that the idea that I'm going to do it all perfect is a total myth. It's a myth for all of us.
Yeah.
And as a recovering perfectionist, there we know that there's just nothing that is going to be perfect. But I think if we can recognize that it's not always going to be perfect, but that doesn't mean we have to give up on it. It doesn't mean that just
Yeah.
because I ate something that wasn't on my diet, that now I don't have to, that I'm never going to be able to reach my weight
Yes.
goal. Or I did something that I didn't want to do, but then now it's all ruined and I have to wait till next year in January to reset.
Yes.
But I love this idea that you can reset every day.
Every day. Yes.
Yeah. But I think if you find yourself, setting a goal or setting a habit or an idea and you're continually blowing it, it might be just a symbol that you have to start smaller,
Yes.
that you've set yourself up, because it's just like saying, if I've set a standard for myself that says I'm going to run 7 miles a day, but I don't even jog right now. Like, that's an
Yeah.
unrealistic standard or goal,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
so it might be a better standard or goal for me to set for myself, that I'm going to I'm gonna strap on my tennis shoes and I'm gonna go for a mile, whether it's running,
Mhm.
walking, jogging, whatever it
Absolutely. I
is,
love that.
and that's where I'm gonna start, because if I set myself up to fail by saying I'm gonna run 7 miles a day, I'm gonna injure myself, first of all.
Yeah.
But I'm also gonna have a high resistance to doing that because it
Mhm.
feels unattainable.
I agree. Sometimes I will see if we just bring this back to real estate investing, somebody's brand new and they have a goal of making $1,000,000 that very first
Right.
year. And I'm like, oh, that could happen. I mean,
Yeah.
we have had
Yes.
students who have done that, but it's not really realistic. I mean, I was on a call the other night with a student and her goal, and it made me happy. It was $250,000.
Yeah.
And she was ecstatic about that goal, and you could tell she was expecting it. She felt good about it. She had a
Mhm.
plan for it. And I was like, I was just so ecstatic for her because I was like, that girl is going to hit that goal and there's no doubt about it. And then move on from there. But just like you said, you can't run 7 miles if we haven't ran one. And
Right.
I do think that there is a fine line of a unrealistic goal, but at the same time
Yeah.
pushing yourself. And we're gonna miss it sometimes. I'll eat both ways. Sometimes I've set a goal for the year, and in 90 days, I've hit it. I'm like,
Yeah.
"Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
I need to up that goal." But other times, it's just the opposite, and we can't beat ourselves up for that. So well, how can you make goals feel motivating when it gets hard rather than overwhelming?
You know, um, I think being able to, again, go back to your why, because maybe we haven't phrased our goals in a way that we stay connected to that. Um, I think that can be really helpful to remind ourselves what the end vision is, and that it's not just about checking that box, but that it's also about this bigger picture that we have for our life
Mhm.
is really powerful. What about you? What do you think?
Well, I think that so many times that we don't learn what does motivate us. We
Mm,
have to get to know ourselves and figure out what motivates me to make change or to do something. And it comes back to that desire. We have to figure out, and you really said it, your why or desire. Why what is going to keep me motivated for maybe if it's about getting healthy. um I lifted more weights this week than I ever have, like a higher amount, to the point that today, after I finished my workout, I had to order some 40s and 50s because I didn't even have them in my gym. And
Nice.
yeah, but but what motivates me to do that? I have to I and we it takes something different for everybody. Some people it is about being stronger, like being able to lift a higher weight. Some people it's about fitting into the dress
Mm,
or whatever that thing is about all the areas in our life. Why do you want to hit $1 million? Really why? Is it so that you can feel good about yourself so that you can say you hit $1 million, or do you have a real why? What is it you're really going to do with that $1 million? And if that's what's motivating you, then that's a whole different thing. So figuring out what it is that motivates us is, I think, a key to our success.
hmm Let's talk about accountability. I'm a coach. I'm a big believer in accountability. But one of the things I love about how you talk about accountability in our organization is you talk about holding yourself accountable. And I think a lot of people want to outsource that job and they want a personal trainer who's going to kick their butt and a business coach who's going to tell them what to do. But this idea of holding yourself accountable, why is that so important?
Oh my gosh. This I could talk about forever, because when we learn to hold ourselves accountable, it's a game changer because then we don't need anybody. We do not need anybody to tell us what to do or how to do it. And I personally think that that is when I saw my confidence soar. When
Mm,
I realized that I could be accountable to myself and I could write down these things and I was going to do them every single day and be accountable to that, it changed who I was from the inside out. Now, does that mean that I didn't fail and still don't do everything that I wanna do? Absolutely not. I mean, I just wanna be so honest here. I fail, and going out of town, I fail every single time. That is not something that I have found, success in yet. If I go out of town, I seldom ever work out, and I
uh-huh.
will eat horrible, and I will not do all of the typical things that I do on a routine. So, but yeah, if we can be accountable to ourselves, and I think that when you see highly successful people in our world, that's what made them successful. It's not because they have some coach telling them,
Mhm.
do this, it is because they have learned to be accountable to themselves.
Major, major.
Yeah.
Um, let's talk about staying motivated. So, how are you staying motivated when things get hard, um, and when things are not working out the way you
I
expected?
have such a vision for what I want to accomplish, especially in the Women's Real Estate Investors Network. I know without a shadow of a doubt that I am walking in my calling, and I have such a vision. It has very little to do with me. Um, it has so much to do with what I want to see, women accomplish, and that is all the motivation I need. I want to see 2 things, and I believe that God's called me to these 2 things. I wanna help women find financial freedom,
Yes.
and I believe that we have a key, that we can do that. But I also want to inspire women to pursue God, because I think that is more life changing than any amount of money that we can make. And so every single day, that's what drives me. So it doesn't matter how I'm feeling or what somebody does or what somebody says, as long as I know that I'm heading towards that. I pretty much, and I have to remind myself because I can get down, I can get discouraged and it's too hard or da 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 da. But when I come back to, wait a minute, why are you doing this? Because I could quit. We could all
Mhm.
quit. But then, oh my gosh, who would not ever know that she could have found financial freedom? And who would not ever know a life that they could live, pursuing God and how that would change their entire trajectory of their family?
Beautiful. How do we keep away from distractions? Do you just do one thing at a time or you multitask? Like, how do you stay focused?
I'm not a good multitasker, Andrea. I am really, really not. I think we have to pull ourselves together when a distraction's coming. When whatever that thing is that is distracting us, we have to get back to, again, it's recognizing it and saying, wait a minute, why am I even giving time to think about this thing? Why am I giving my time and my energy and my worry or my stress to this thing? I was just talking to a friend the other day on the phone, and she just said something that seemed it just was so profound. She said, successful people don't have time to be negative or to be gossiping about somebody else. If you're busy changing your life and changing other people's lives, you're not it's going to be so much harder to become distracted. So
Mhm.
really, again, I guess if I wrapped all of that up, it would be really knowing what you want in life, and then it's going to be a lot tougher for anything to get you distracted.
Mhm. I think just like we will set goals to please other people or to meet other people's expectations, I think sometimes the greatest distractions come when we are putting other people's goals in front of our own, or when someone asks us for help. Because that can become like we feel like, oh, they've asked me for help. I need to help them. Otherwise, what will they think of me? Otherwise, am I really being who I say I am, which is kind and generous and all these beautiful things? But in reality, like that distraction,
Mhm.
while there's some positive things that can come from helping other people, if every single day our own to-do list or our own
Yes.
primary focus gets pushed off of the plate because we're always giving to other people, we're always taking care of others, and someone else's to-do list has become our own because they emailed us and they really need help, then that can be a really challenging distraction to figure out, like, how do I
It really
how do I let
can.
that go? Because it's not like I'm sitting here watching Netflix. I'm literally helping a sister out who is
Yeah.
feeling really discouraged or desperate or, all of those things. But the reality is we can't be everything for everyone. And at some point we have to make a decision about what is going to be our highest priority, that is going to serve the world at the highest level, and
Yes.
that is in alignment with our calling, not just one person's actual phone call to us, right?
Yes. Yes. And if we are people pleasers, that's going to be more difficult
Yeah.
than if we're not.
Mhm.
So,
I think a lot of us have also trained the people in our lives around us, at what level they can rely on us, or that
mhm,
we're just going to show up and save them whenever they call. And so
mhm.
sometimes it does take some hard
Yep.
conversations to start to protect your time, to start to manage those expectations of other people. And we gotta teach people how to treat us in
Yes.
this new set of goals we have, in this new person that we are
Absolutely.
becoming.
Absolutely. Well, this was a great conversation. I loved this.
Yes.
And so now we want to challenge our listeners. So to do this week, to have an honest conversation with yourself and see what your mindset and your behavior, how does that contribute to your overall accountability and success. So to take a few minutes to answer the short self-assessment to see how well you hold yourself accountable and what you might need to improve. So okay, are y'all ready? I'm going to ask the questions. Maybe you want to write them down. Number 1 is, do I look at the bigger picture or do I just hone in on all of the smaller details? So just ask yourself that. Are you a big picture kind of person? Are you just getting all tripped up on all of the smaller details? Number 2, I love this one. Do I reward myself for progress I make? Do you do that, Andrea? Do you celebrate your progress?
I need to be better at that, Teresa. So I'm gonna take the challenge on this one. But
Okay.
yeah, we try to celebrate, but not at the level that we need to. It always I have an on to the next mentality. Like
Yeah.
I check it off and I'm like on to the next. What's the next thing that needs to
Yeah.
happen? So taking time to
Yeah.
celebrate is really important.
Okay, number 3. When is the last time I went out of my comfort zone? Woo, this is so good. And I'm gonna throw this in. You can actually get addicted to getting out of your comfort zone.
Little
And I
thrill seekers.
a little yes, yes. And so if you never do it, you're never going to know what's on the other side of it.
Yes.
All right, number 4. Where is an area of positive opportunity in a difficult situation I face? Where is an area, so can we find something positive in a difficult situation?
Mhm.
And sometimes that's really difficult. We got to dig deep for that.
Yes.
Number 5, what activities have given me the greatest joy or opportunities for growth? And what am I doing to maximize them?
I love that question.
I do too. I do too. Again, sometimes we just don't even take the time to think about what gives me great joy.
Yeah.
And here's the last one. Do I begin and end my day in gratitude?
So
Being
good. So good. Well, I'm excited. I love this. I had somebody on one of our coaching calls this last week say, "I took Teresa's challenge last week and I did the thing." And so we want to challenge all of you to really take a moment and explore what's going on in your own heart, in your own spirit, and to do something different as a result of what you're hearing on this podcast today. And if you heard something that helped you today, please share this podcast with a friend. Hit that follow button and leave us an honest review. It lets us know that we're making an impact and it helps us reach more people.
Yes, ma'am. Well, if you know that you're ready to create financial freedom and build generational wealth, then check out the Without Fear of Her Future Masterclass. The link to join is in the podcast show notes.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. And on behalf of the Women's Real Estate Investors Network and Tresa Todd, I'm Andrea Engstrom, encouraging you to be brave and dream big.